So I just posted an announcement that about reading the textbook that when I was finished with it, I'm like, that's almost as long as reading one of these chapters from the textbook. So I just thought I'd pop up a quick video and see if that might be a better way to engage you in these ideas. The idea is that much of the difficulty that exists in the world with textbook reading is something that you experience every day, and you might be experiencing it with this History of Literacy Education book. It's not a title that a lot of us are going to think, ooh, yes, history of reading education, just what I've been thinking about reading all along. Active reading techniques are going to help you, and they're going to help your people you work with throughout your life. So I just wanted you to think about, can you use some of these active reading techniques when you're approaching this book? Will it change the mindset that you have towards reading textbook chapters? And some of this is just about forcing yourself to do the active thing, to make the switch, because the mindset that you have when you approach an assigned task is completion, and that doesn't engage the areas of your mind that need to be involved in comprehension, metacognition, and so on. So we want an active reader every time we approach this. Otherwise, as you know and I know, we get to the bottom of the page, we realize I read every damn word on the page, but I don't remember any of it. You couldn't do a recall, you couldn't do answering questions at the end of the chapter. All, it's just gone. It's not there. So how do we stop ourselves from doing that? Research techniques going all the way back to the 1940s and the 1950s are that if we approach the text with questions in mind and then read to answer those questions, it changes the mindset. The interesting thing about that is that you may not have to read all of the words to answer the question that you think you're going to be asking. And sometimes not reading all of the words is the answer. I mean, it's better probably in many cases to read everything that's been written, but if you're reading with an active mindset, I'm just going to try some of this for you. So if I take the headers and the subheaders from my chapter and I rewrite them as questions, I'm going to approach with a different mindset. So I approach a word like this, the enculturated reader, and I remember myself as a sixth grader reading social studies texts and just nodding off every time I saw the word culture and society and so on. Those textbooks were so dry, and later on I find out that these things are fascinating. So enculturated reader, what do you mean by that? And is there anything redeemable and interesting in this? I'm just going to ask a question like that as I dig in here. What are you trying to tell me about the enculturated reader? Is it going to be just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, or am I going to read in and say, oh, if I think about it this way, I'm going to be interested. So I'm going to write that down. What do you mean by enculturated reader? And I'm actually challenging the authors when I say something like that. Looking back at the study of reading by examining the history of writing systems. How am I going to understand things about our writing system today by reading about ancient Sumerian? Give me some historical relevance. That's the question I'm going to ask here. I'm going to see if I challenge you as authors, are you going to show up with something that's worth my time? Schools as sites of enculturation. How are schools involved with that enculturation thing that I read about in the first part? What's the job of schools in that? Reading and empire. What does reading have to do with imperialism? Pedagogy of reading. How are you going to keep me awake while I read about pedagogy of reading? The teaching of reading. Does it really need to be taught, or is it something that most of us just kind of catch on to? I know that I learned to read before I went to school, but a lot of my friends didn't, and they ended up struggling with reading. So I'm thinking about, what is this pedagogy, and what is the makeup and differences between people who learn to read versus people who just kind of catch on or acquire it. Closing, I'm gonna wait. What are you gonna wrap me up with here? I don't have a great question for that, but so think about that. What are some of the key developments of reading and writing in society? All I do is add a what to that one, and then I'm going to skim and scan through that and find the ones that make the most sense to me. So that's going to get me through that first part, chapter 1.1. I'm going to do some skim and scan before I start, find those headers, find some topic sentences, and change them into questions. That's something that we do with kids all the time to help them approach texts with a different mindset. Maybe look at the other couple of strategies that I put out there in the announcement this week, and maybe you don't have any of these kinds of problems, but I know that most people in the world have problems with intrinsic motivation and active reading versus passive reading. All right, thanks.